See, I didn't forget. Just took way longer than I planned. Development hell is hell. So, DLC is moving along for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and character talk is moving right along with it. Compared to the base game, this different situation opens different doors for different characters than before, some of whom may get a chance now that they didn't have previously. In part 1 of this quote-quote prediction, I covered a handful of potential first-party characters who might have a shot at getting in and are at least worth keeping an eye on for various reasons. Check that out first if you haven't yet, by the way. Interesting stuff there. For this second part, we're going to be talking potential guest fighters, brought in from companies other than the big end. We saw some surprising new figures join the fight during Smash 4's run of DLC, and a lot of people are hoping or recklessly expecting their minds to get blown several times over with every remaining reveal this time. In fact, I've seen many speculators convinced that DLC's gotta be all third-party characters, and while I do not believe that in the slightest, it's a testament to how much people want to talk about them. This video won't be a simple rundown of here's exactly who I expect to see or anything, because DLC picks tend to be very difficult to nail down. Instead, I'll be going over several characters that fall into 3 different categories. Frontrunners who I believe have the best potential shot on paper, plausible picks who aren't quite frontrunner level but have a, well, plausible opportunity here, and conditional characters whose chances ride on some specific thing lining up in the right way, but could practically reach frontrunner level if those conditions come to pass. Real quick, I want to recap the criteria we followed in part 1, built from the guidelines the actual Smash developers seem to follow. Timing can make or break a potential newcomer, deliberate retro picks notwithstanding. Someone might fall out of relevance at the wrong time right as newcomers get chosen, or as we saw with the base roster, you can also be too new and have your game not be ready until too late after the roster was figured out. Keep that in mind since according to Sakurai himself, the characters for this wave of DLC were finalized back in November. Moveset potential is a big deal. Generally it pays to have something new and interesting to bring to an ever-growing roster, or at least have a moveset that's easy to put together. This whole talk of representing franchises or ideas is off base. We're not here to play judge and decide which series matter and which don't, and since this isn't how Sakurai sees it either, the roster isn't meant to be a measuring stick of hierarchy the way we fans often treat it as. Based on past precedent, I think characters currently appearing as summons or as Mii costumes new to Ultimate are too risky to expect right now unless we get strong reason to believe otherwise. That said, I think characters with old costumes grandfathered in from Smash 4 are fair game, and right now I do not think Spirits deconfirm anyone yet, since being a trophy wasn't a deal breaker for Smash 4's DLC, though I'm also not ruling it out. The idea that they'll pick some newcomers specifically to cross-promote upcoming games is a popular one, but looking under the surface shows things are ambiguous at best, and we've seen many cases where that did not happen, and other cases where we just got costumes or a stage or music. This is especially important when talking third parties, since a lot of arguments get made that Nintendo will use a Smash inclusion as a bargaining tool with other companies, even though things have historically not been so clear-cut. We should keep that in mind. Finally, this isn't about Nintendo forcing Sakurai to do their bidding, or some other company imposing their will on Nintendo, or any such thing. I think we're so used to viewing things from the lens of a power struggle that we expect everything to be that way, and it causes us more harm as a community than you'd think. However, there's one thing we actually should change here, because with third-party characters, relevance and timing aren't as big a deal, at least not compared to... The guest fighters we've seen so far are all iconic characters or emblematic of their genre or have some other reputation that makes them notable. Even the two youngest fit this. Bayonetta has become the modern face of action games, and Persona 5 has been a critical and commercial success above and beyond its predecessors. This is admittedly very loose and subjective, but I think it's something to remember nonetheless. You know, as long as we don't start playing judge and try to declare who deserves it and who doesn't. Also, if you've heard talk claiming Reggie said at the Game Awards back in December that every DLC character is coming from a series that isn't in Smash yet, he didn't actually say that. It's a misquote that made the rounds because of how shocking it sounded. He actually just said the characters themselves will be new to Smash, reminding a crowd that may not have been following Ultimate too closely that it's all newcomers from here on out. Remember, hype responsibly. We need to keep the record straight with these things so we don't dismiss anyone's chances for undue reasons. Finally, I know, almost done. there have been rumors circulating of varying credibility, and I want to respect the wishes of anyone who wants to avoid potential spoilers. Out of the characters we're about to discuss, one of them is someone I believe has too much evidence in their favor to ignore, and another is a character whose chances are directly affected by the former. When we get to them, I will give a heads up beforehand for those of you who want to keep a potential leak a surprise, and I'll provide a timestamp for the section after them so you can skip past if you wish. Also, avoid the comments because let's be honest, comment sections cannot keep a secret. Okay, with all that said, let's begin. Starting off are our frontrunner characters. I believe these three, on paper at least, feel like the most likely choices. Not that you should pencil them in because DLC just cannot be predicted like that, but these feel like they're the most worth talking about. And the first of them is someone Ultimate's collaborators would be intimately familiar with. Hoping to be the next guest fighter from Bandai Namco, our first frontrunner is... Lloyd! Despite being one of several protagonists across the long-running Tales series, Lloyd Irving is one of the standouts. While he wasn't the first main character the franchise had, nor is he the single most popular one, his debut game was the first that many now fans of the series played, and the first to really hit it big outside of Japan. You could say he's the Tales version of Lyn, and this was enough clout to get a Mii costume during Smash 4's DLC, which is absent in Ultimate, but that's because every third-party costume was removed while every first-party costume stayed. But more importantly, I think these circumstances, all combined, give Lloyd a legit shot at becoming Banco's second character in Smash. But I wouldn't have him here if he didn't have something unique to offer, right? Lloyd's whole shtick is that he dual wields. You see, he figured twice the swords would mean twice the effectiveness. Long story. Swinging two weapons at once would let him put out hitboxes at a frequency rivaled only by the Ice Climbers, using unpolished yet still skilled stabs and slashes to combo opponents and rack up damage just like in his games. That said, he'd kinda need those combos since the damage on each individual attack would be lacking, and the range on his swords would be merely okay and not actually enough to zone fully with. Think like the range of Toon Link or Mii Sword Fighter. Fortunately, his playstyle would still have some diversity to it, thanks to the wide selection of combat arts he has access to. Techniques like Demon Fang, Sonic Thrust, Sword Rain, Tiger Blade, Rising Falcon, Beast. The list goes on, and it's something his fan-made moveset in Super Smash Flash 2 actually handled pretty well. It's a moveset that is very intricate, yet also kinda predictable to a fault at times. Lloyd may be good with a blade, but he can also be really dense and easy to read at times, so his playstyle should reflect that naturally. We ought to also talk potential stages, since we know every character included in the Fighter Pass is bringing one with them. The obvious pick here would be the Tower of Salvation, a key landmark in Tales of Symphonia that serves several plot points over the course of the story. And it's also what Super Smash Flash 2 went with, so there's that. But if the Smash team wanted to do something smaller scale, there's also the Martel Temple, the game's first dungeon. Having the place that introduces you to so many of the game's mechanics be a place that also introduces Lloyd into Smash would be kind of appropriate, I guess. Next, we have a character who honestly doesn't get half the credit it's due, probably because their home series is newer in the grand scheme of things, but it's really hit it big over the past decade, and much of that is through Nintendo systems. Hoping to join Mega Man and the Shotos under Capcom's banner, it's... Monster Hunter! The Monster Hunter series gets overlooked a lot by Smash speculators because it doesn't have as much seniority, but it's actually become a really big deal. Most of its games over the past couple console generations have been Nintendo exclusives, no less. The one exception being a Smash hit in its own right that skipped the Switch because the Switch wasn't a thing yet when development began, apparently. Nonetheless, Monster Hunter has a presence on Nintendo's newest console now. We already have the iconic Rathalos in Ultimate as a boss, and I think the door is still wide open for the playable hunters to join the fight. There's a lot of variety on offer here, even by Avatar character standards. Monster Hunter games are famous for having a ton of available weapon types, fighting styles, and armor sets forged from the very beasts you've slain. I figure Smash would stick with the signature Rathalos armor as their quote-quote default, split the alternate costumes between half male and half female, and use a different armor set for each of the rest to where every single Hunter alt would have a unique model. A lot of work for sure, but this is the character they'd do it for. This variety would carry over into their weapon selection as well, once again falling back on a default weapon with the Great Sword, while pulling out other weapons for specific attacks to create a weapon master style not unlike the Inkling's moveset. Though no matter the weapon, the monster hunter would have a very slow and deliberate fighting style, playing patiently and waiting for the right openings just like when facing their quarry, then dealing devastating hits when they get that opening. You could even work some of their items into the moveset as well. Barrel bombs for traps, potions for temporary busts if you can get through that silly-ass animation without getting hit, and other such things. We gotta consider stages as well, of course. Verdant Hills is a recurring early game location with a wide open layout that could also work as a traveling stage that lands in different spots. And either interpretation of this place would have various monsters in the background that may occasionally enter the fray themselves. Or for something a little more close quarters, there's the Spear-Tipped Crag, a battleground above the clouds where a particularly impressive fight goes down in Monster Hunter 4. So here's where things get awkward. You see, our next character is the one who has ties to certain rumors. I realize not everyone wants to risk potential spoilers, so here's your heads up. If you'd rather play it safe, here's a moment to skip to the time you see here, right now. Okay, everyone ready? Because it's time to discuss a character who by now is basically an open secret. Erdrick! So despite Dragon Quest having more of a niche audience in Western countries, it's a really big deal in Japan. The first game practically created many of the standards we associate with Eastern RPGs today. And while there have been many player characters across the series' history, Erdrick from Dragon Quest III stands out above the rest. You could say he's the Cloud of Dragon Quest, and probably the go-to choice for Smash. Of course, the main reason there's been so much talk about Erdrick lately is because several rumors are pointing toward his inclusion, and a couple have been pretty credible so far. Though there are also some sketchier ones trying to piggyback off them. You know how this rumor stuff goes, so you gotta keep an eye out. But the biggest eyebrow raiser is some code that data miners discovered in Ultimate's files back at launch, pointing toward an in-development character codenamed Brave, which just so happens to be the class title of most Dragon Quest protagonists in the Japanese versions. Yeah, we probably got another Smash 4 Ryu situation on our hands. It's technically not set in stone yet, but things are looking pretty good for this hero of legend, to say the least. So, what could even make Erdrick so interesting of a choice? While he defaults to a sword and shield, he could also fall back on a few other weapon types for certain attacks. Whips, boomerangs, even the mighty Flail of Destruction. He can learn a handful of magic spells in his game as well, ranging from simple fire and lightning to teleportation to encasing himself in metal to become temporarily invincible and immobile. This gives him a spell sword angle that add to a roster sorely lacking in magic users. You could even go all in on the legacy angle here, using old school sound effects for his animations, maybe even pixelated motion lines on his attacks, and alternate palettes based on other series protagonists, or an alt with his famously gaudy armor, or maybe even the female version of Erdrick, as you could choose a male or female protagonist in Dragon Quest III. Yeah, it turns out the name is actually more of a title. I think for potential stages, we're best off keeping things old school. A traveling stage that spans the realm of Alefgard could do the trick, as a window into the past of sorts. That and one rumor points toward this actually being the case. Alternatively, they could go with the labyrinthine Dragon Lord's Castle, lair of multiple big bads across the series. But for now, onto our plausible picks. These are characters I wouldn't quite call frontrunners for one reason or another, but who have enough of a case as is to have, well, a plausible shot. Enough to be worth giving a deeper look, at least. Our first character from this category is one on the upswing, who came back to life several years ago and whose parent company has been increasingly more willing to work with Nintendo and even work together. Someone make sure he isn't sleeping on the job again. It's Rayman! Ubisoft's first big mascot has a long and convoluted history with Nintendo. Originally intended to debut on the SNES, some complications came up during development and he wouldn't see the light of day until the PS1. But all of his major titles since have been multi-plat affairs, and many have found their ways to Nintendo systems. Relations between Nintendo and Ubisoft have been strong lately, rebounding after executive meddling on the latter's part during the Wii U era soured things for a while. And we've even seen the two companies actively collaborate in recent years. Because of this strengthening partnership, I think Ubisoft would be one of the few Western companies Sakurai would consider working with for a Smash newcomer. I mean, hey, we already have a few spirits from them in the game already. And while you could make an argument for Ezio or another assassin or a rabbit now that they've gone through an unexpected redemption arc, I think the Limbless Wonder would still be the go-to choice. Rayman's greatest strength as a fighter would be in using his disjointed limbs to go toe-to-toe with opponents, spacing his attacks to poke at defensive options and intercept aggressive attacks. Nothing quite like winning neutral by literally throwing a punch at someone. He also has a lot of various props and set pieces that could add to his moveset, which seems to be a recurring thing with these characters so far. Stuff like his homing fist ability, the power-ups from Rayman 3, purple looms in their various forms, and those walking missiles from Rayman 2 could come together to create a style all his own. And we gotta work in his ability to spin his hair like a helicopter to hover. Maybe you could hold the jump button after you've used his double jump to slow his descent. This could be tied together by animations inspired by Rayman Origins and Legends, with exaggerated expressions bursting with excitement. He's just happy to be here. Far as stages go, the Glade of Dreams comes to mind first. A very natural setting with many locales to choose from, and a more serene atmosphere than Smash stages tend to usually have. Alternatively, they could pull from a particularly infamous location, with a stage based on the Cave of Bad Dreams from Rayman 2. I bet about half of you who played that game just had flashbacks, didn't you? Our next candidate is... oh boy. Okay, so next up is someone who has a modest support base and a very loud hate base. Yet despite the latter, I do think there's a case to be made here, and more potential than they often get credit for even. Best get your flame shields ready, because next up is the veritable hornet's nest that is... Steve! So, in case you've been living under a rock, Steve is the name of the default avatar from a little game called Minecraft. You've probably heard of it. To say Minecraft has become a big name in gaming is an understatement. It's been an outright phenomenon for a while now, one of the greatest selling games of all time. Most of you watching have probably played it at least once. Nintendo and Microsoft have been increasingly more willing to bury the hatchet lately despite technically still being business rivals. And Minecraft has found its way to multiple Nintendo platforms, the Switch included. This all feels like it's lining up in a way that honestly gives Steve a plausible shot. And despite the vocal opposition, despite the resentment toward being a newer character whose game draws a different crowd than the traditional gamer community, despite being seen as getting in the way of a different pair who many think should get first dibs, I think there's some legit potential here that we shouldn't gatekeep. The key with Steve would be to bring the feel of Minecraft into Smash's environment. To that end, his animation should probably feel similar to the rigid and limited movements in his home game, while being touched up and made a little more fluid to make it easier to tell what he's doing and click better in Smash's environment. Moveset-wise, there's some truly impressive potential here and several different directions you could take it in, all based on what Sakurai and crew might feel works best. All the various weapon types, tools and objects you can create, they could even utilize the terrain itself. Imagine being able to place blocks down as obstacles or build yourself new equipment on the fly for temporary buffs. All going toward a playstyle that encouraged the same creativity and limitless possibility that his series embodies, giving his players freedom to experiment and tailor how they fight to suit what they want, while being properly balanced still, of course. As for a home stage for Steve, well, what better than Minecraft itself? A cross-section of the overworld and underground would be able to cram in as many references and details as possible that truly embody the spirit of the game. Breakable walls, enemy mobs, lava flowing freely next to precariously placed TNT boxes, all possibilities for a stage that could be as freeform as the game it comes from. So, for our last plausible pick, I want to stick to Western characters. Circumstances change over time, and different characters can have doors open and close as events play out. You see, this one was a long shot at best during Smash 4's DLC run, but in the time since, events have occurred that I think makes them legitimately possible now. Our final members of the plausible category: Banjo Kazooie! Ah, see, I didn't forget. Absence makes the heart grow fonder, or so the saying goes. Been a long time since the Bear and Bird were in action, yet they're still remembered for their games back around the turn of the century. Known best for taking the formula established by Super Mario 64 and putting their own twist on it, the Banjo Kazooie games created a whole new platforming style all about collecting stuff. But ever since their parent company Rare was acquired by Microsoft, the pair has gone quiet, one experimental foray aside, and so they feel like a missing piece to a lot of gamers who grew up in the 1990s. Despite some very vocal Smash Ballot support a few years ago, the unsteady ground between Nintendo and Microsoft at the time made them not the most feasible. But nowadays, I think these two may have a decent shot. At the very least, I think it could be a coin flip between them and Steve. They both have their merits, which is why they're both in the plausible section. Who knows, maybe we could see one get in this year and the other in a second wave of DLC. Part of this duo's appeal is how their two contrasting personalities play off each other so well. Banjo is the muscle, kind-hearted but a little dense and naive, and Kazooie is the smart one with a bad habit of not knowing when to keep her beak shut. Their attacks could play off this contrast by having them cover each other's combat weaknesses in a sense, such as Banjo having more power behind the moves where he attacks, and Kazooie providing greater reach with her moves. And I mean there are a lot of moves at their fingertips, finger and wingtips, based on all the techniques they learn over the course of their games. You could practically build most of their moveset with those alone. Maybe the Smash team could even incorporate collectathon elements into their concept as a gimmick of sorts. Perhaps bunches of eggs and feathers could appear at random on the stage one at a time, and they need to roam around and collect them to keep their ammo topped off. For stages, Spiral Mountain serves as part of the main hub in both N64 games, perfect for a bigger stage that have a lot going on. Or we could venture into the other part of the first game's hub world, the lair of one Gruntilda Winky Bunyan. Yes, that really is her last name. Now it's time for our conditional picks. Calling them long shots isn't quite accurate because their chances could vary wildly depending on how things play out. If certain conditions are fulfilled, they can have a very legitimate chance. But if they aren't, well, then it wouldn't be easy for them. Our first conditional character is a prime example, one who came back to life recently in impressive fashion, yet we still don't know exactly who the Smash team is up for collaborating with. And this character's Western parent companies are not as safe a guess as the two we've looked at so far. But if Sakurai did come knocking, he'd be more than capable of stepping up to the plate. Hoping to spin into action on the biggest of stages, it's Crash! Seems like a lot of old favorites are getting revivals lately, huh? A former PlayStation icon who went multi-plat over time, Crash Bandicoot jumped the shark a bit from the PS2 era onward and eventually got kinda quiet. But after spending so many years on the down low, Crash is back. And 2017's remake of his first three games was a smash hit that even found its way to the Switch. While the Insane trilogy was too late to factor into the base roster, it does make him an option for DLC, and the fact that he's legitimately well known in Japan also helps, though I personally don't buy the idea that he'd be picked to stick it to Sony or whatnot. But the question still remains, which Western companies are on Sakurai's radar? As a creation of Naughty Dog, currently under Activision's banner, it's hard to say whether he'd get a look or not. But if the right conditions come to pass and he doesn't get out-prioritized, well, who knows? Guest fighters tend to get some extra TLC to feel like they walked right out of their home series, and Crash would be no exception. His playstyle should emphasize survival, fighting carefully and defensively to get through a match relatively unscathed, just like getting through a level in his games without losing too many lives. He's also known for a lot of exaggerated and madcap animations himself, looking like something straight out of a cartoon a lot of the time. Though he's also the type to kick back and relax once the danger is past, so maybe a victory animation or two could pull from that as well. Like most platformer characters, Crash has picked up quite the repertoire over time, and even just his original trilogy has a lot to work with. His signature spin, the slide attack and body slam he picked up in Crash 2, the jetpack from Crash 2 that could work as a recovery move, the bazooka and vehicles from Crash 3, the list goes on. Maybe he could even summon different types of crates. Hey, it wouldn't be the first creative liberty Smash has taken. And of course, Crash would also bring some interesting stage choices. The very first level of his very first game would be a fitting callback and an interesting place to fight, especially if they worked in hazards from further into the island like stone rollers and man-eating plants. Alternatively, they could use the hub world of Crash 2 as a Pokemon Stadium style stage that'd warp you to various places for short stretches of time. Alright, here's your other warning. Our next character is directly affected by the rumors surrounding the character we discussed earlier. Anyone who'd rather stay in the dark for now to be on the safe side, you can skip to this time here, and you have a few seconds to do that now. Okay, so while things are pointing strongly toward one Square Enix character, I think there's another we should also mention. A one-hit wonder who has weathered the test of time, and someone that many Nintendo fans are still hoping to see come back someday. Backed by the Smash Ballad and by Sakurai himself, it's Geno! You know, it's really impressive how well Geno has held up. Designed as an original character by then Squaresoft for an experimental spin-off of a beloved IP, Super Mario RPG wound up a cult classic and trendsetter, and Geno himself is remembered just as fondly. While support for him is quieter than it was back in Brawl's day, it seems he still has a lot of people hoping to see him grant the wish long thought forgotten. With his Mii costume in Smash 4 as a big step forward, and the knowledge that Sakurai actually considered him for Brawl, could this finally be his time? Well, the fact that things are pointing toward Erdrick instead complicates matters. Because, could we even get 2 Square Enix characters in this same batch of DLC? Nothing's impossible, but it does seem, I don't know, you know? Though, for what it's worth, if a second wave of DLC happens, Geno's window of opportunity would be wide open once again and his odds would rise significantly. Well, probably. As basically the Marioverse equivalent of, I kid you not, an angel possessing an action figure, Geno wields a very unique blend of powerful star magic and the weaponry built into the child's toy he inhabits. Rocket fists and sized-up toy bullets are complemented by destructive lasers and razor-sharp discs of light. Going off his stats in Super Mario RPG, Geno would probably be fairly mobile and hard-hitting. He's got projectiles to spare, but instead of nickel and diming you, he's more the type to blow you away on the spot. But he'd also be pretty light since, you know, he's possessing a toy and all. And giving his strong attacks a lot of wind-up and significant end lag afterward would be a logical weakness that'd make him vulnerable if he doesn't connect. And of course, you gotta work in the action commands that Super Mario RPG established and that all Mario RPG spin-offs are famous for nowadays, letting you deal extra damage or give attacks additional effects if you do an extra input at just the right time. For stages, the obvious pick would be the Forest Maze where Geno first joins the party. It's a pretty iconic location with equally iconic music. But if you want something darker, the interdimensional weapons factory that serves as the game's final dungeon would be a very unique place to fight. Alright, how do we finish this off? Our last conditional character is kinda similar to Joker, someone who took a formerly niche series and made it mainstream. But once again, the biggest question is whether their parent company is one that get a serious look. Not to mention how different they'd feel from most of our playable casts so far. But if the stars align just right, this may be the perfect chance for the one they call Dragonborn. By this point, Skyrim needs about as much introduction as Minecraft does. Such a massive hit worldwide that it propelled the Elder Scrolls into the limelight and, over the years, has been ported to every damn modern system under the sun, and its eventual presence on the Switch was a selling point to the system's very first reveal trailer. Thanks to that, what felt like a pipe dream in Smash 4 is something that actually feels possible now. But just like with Crash, the question remains, which Western companies are on Sakurai's radar? Who might be high enough priority to find a way in with so much competition knocking at the door? Bethesda's made a name for themselves, and Skyrim did do very well in Japan, and Sakurai has even brought up the game in his Famitsu articles before when discussing game design, but is it enough to win out over so many others? I don't know. Though I do think that if Bethesda gets a look for a newcomer, the Dovahkiin would be the character of theirs that Sakurai would want most. The Elder Scrolls handles fantasy in a more grounded, realistic style than what we've seen in Smash so far, and a character from it should embody that. We have an iconic default look to work with, the male Nord with the horned helm you see here, but alts based on other races could also show up, though the hurt boxes would still need to stay the same, so more exotic alts like, say, an Argonian might be a bit more difficult to implement. The Dragonborn is usually depicted with a sword, a shield, and a dagger, and so would probably favor those for attacking, but could also have other weapons to fall back on if necessary. Again, compared to our other fighters from fantasy settings, this character would be less elegant and flashy and more hands-on and pragmatic when it comes to combat. And of course, the signature dragon shouts would fit right in as the Dragonborn specials, with unrelenting force at neutral, naturally. Maybe they could even have a mechanic where the shouts have 3 levels of effect based on how long you're able to charge them. For stage options, the first that comes to mind is High Hrothgar, a monastery located at Skyrim's highest point that plays an important role in unlocking the full extent of your power. Or maybe they could go with the surrounding mountain itself, for a multi-level stage set amidst precarious cliffs with frigid winds bearing down on the fighters. And there you have it. A selection of third-party characters who I think are most worth keeping an eye on as Ultimate's DLC development unfolds. These characters are dominating speculation right now, but remember not to go too far with it, alright? Newcomers aren't chosen just for the sake of spectacle or for how many jaws Sakurai and the devs can make hit the floor, so we should be careful not to expect that nor hold it against them if it doesn't happen that way. Remember after Cloud's reveal last time, when so many speculators became convinced the last couple DLC characters had to be even more shocking of choices, only for the final characters to go in a different direction instead? Groupthink is a powerful and dangerous thing, so hype responsibly. And be sure to keep an eye out for other characters beyond the ones you're already thinking about, alright? Real quick, some honorable mentions who didn't quite make this video. Sora's been getting a lot of buzz lately, what with Kingdom Hearts 3 finally being out, but for various reasons he just kinda narrowly missed the cut here. No hard feelings, alright? Heihachi from Tekken was considered for Smash 4 and might get another look here, but the way Sakurai cited not knowing how to build his moveset has me hesitating. Additional Sonic characters might have a shot, with Tails and Dr. Eggman being the standouts, but again they just kinda fell short of getting into the video. Narrowing it down to 9 was not easy, trust me. Likewise, Capcom has a handful more characters that could also still have a chance. I just feel Monster Hunter is the most notable of them right now. And of course, there are many other characters I haven't mentioned here. Just because I didn't talk about them doesn't mean they don't matter. And we're done. Phew. Not gonna lie, everything leading up to the February Direct had me worried we'd get a reveal that had invalidated all the work I was putting into this. But all's well that ends well, right? Maybe I can keep this structure going forward with a few more videos that aren't so time sensitive. Maybe another video about more possible Echo Fighters that we could maybe get outside the Fighter Pass? Maybe one about characters who could get promoted from Assist Trophy to Playable if such a thing becomes an option. I know such characters are a popular topic. What kind of stuff would you like to see me take a crack at? I'd like to get a feel for what people are looking for. Special thanks goes to these people in particular, especially to my graphic design guy for helping make everything look so presentable. Major thanks to my patrons for supporting me all this way. Couldn't do it without you guys. And hey, if you're interested in supporting the channel, check out the link in the description or just wait a few seconds for the end screen. In the meantime, give a look to the rest of my videos. I do character concepts, Elite Smash highlights, even the occasional non-Smash video. Whew. And so, until next time, I need to heal up a little. Anyone got one of those fairies in a bottle?